Violence, real and threatened, was a major underpinning of Jim Crow racial caste system that operated in parts of the United States from the 1870s to the 1960s. The racial hierarchy was also supported by millions of everyday objects that caricatured and stereotyped African Americans. Some of the caricatures were created as a defense for slavery, but their utility extended into the Jim Crow period. From slavery through the Jim Crow era, the Mammy image served the political, social, and economic interest of mainstream white America. During slavery, the Mammy caricature was posited as proof that blacks, in this case, black women, were contented, even happy as slaves. Her wide grin, hearty laughter, and loyal servitude were offered as evidence of the supposed humanity of the institution of slavery. This was the Mammy caricature, and like all caricatures, it contained a little truth surrounded by a larger lie. The caricature portrayed an obese, coarse, maternal figure. She had great love for her white family, but often treated her own family with disdain. Although she had children, sometimes many, she was completely desexualized. She belonged to the white family, though it was rarely stated. She was a faithful worker. She typically had no black friends. The white family was her entire world. Obviously, the Mammy caricature was more myth than accurate portrayal. Catherine Clinton, a historian, claimed the real antebellum Mammies were rare. Records do acknowledge the presence of female slaves who served as the right hand of the plantation mistresses. Yet documents from the planter class during the first 50 years following the American Revolution reveal only a handful of such examples. Not until after emancipation did black women run households or occupy any significant number, the special positions ascribed to them in folklore and fiction. The Mammy was created by white Southerners to redeem the relationship between black women and white men within slave society in response to the anti-slavery attack from the North during the antebellum period. In primary records from before the Civil War, hard evidence for its existence simply does not appear. According to Patricia Turner, professor of African American and African Studies, before the Civil War, only very few wealthy whites could afford the luxury of utilizing the black women as house servants rather than field hands. Moreover, Turner claims that house servants were usually mixed race, skinny, blacks were not given much food, and young, fewer than 10% of black women lived beyond 50 years. Why were the fictional Mammies so different from the real-life counterparts? The answer lies squarely within the complex sexual relations between blacks and whites. Abolitionists argued that one of the many brutal aspects of slavery was that the slave owners sexually exploited their female slaves, especially light-skinned ones who approximated the mainstream definition of female sexual attractiveness. The Mammy caricature was deliberately constructed to suggest ugliness. Mammy was portrayed as dark-skinned, often pitch black, in a society that regarded black skin as ugly, tainted. She was obese, sometimes morbidly overweight. Moreover, she was often portrayed as old or at least middle age. The attempt was to desexualize Mammy. The implicit assumption was this: no reasonable white man would choose a fat, elderly black woman instead of the idolized white woman. The black Mammy was portrayed as lacking all sexual and sensual qualities. The de-eroticizing of Mammy meant that the white wife, and by extension, the white family, was safe. The sexual exploitation of black women by white men was common during the antebellum period, and this was true irrespective of the economic relationship involved. In other words, black women were sexually exploited by rich whites, middle-class whites, and poor whites. Sexual relations between blacks and whites, whether consensual or rape, were taboo, but they occurred often. All black women and girls, regardless of their physical appearance, were vulnerable to being sexually assaulted by white men. The Mammy caricature tells many lies. In this case, the lie is that white men did not find black women sexually desirable. The Mammy caricature implied that black women were only fit to be domestic workers. Thus, the stereotype became a rationalization for economic discrimination. During the Jim Crow period, approximately 1877 to 1966, America's race-based, race-segregated job economy limited most blacks to menial, low-paying, and low-status jobs. Many black women found themselves forced into one job category: house servant. Joanne Gibson Robinson, a biographer of the Civil Rights Movement, described the limited opportunities for black women in the 1950s. Jobs for clerks in dime stores, cashiers in markets, and telephone operators were numerous, but were not open to black women. A $50 a week worker could employ a black domestic to clean her home, cook the food, wash and iron clothes, and nurse the baby for as little as $20 per week. During slavery, only the very wealthy could afford to purchase black women and use them as house servants. But during the Jim Crow era, even middle-class white women could hire black domestic workers. These black women were not mammies. Mammy was black, fat, with huge breasts, and head covered with a handkerchief to hide her nappy hair. Strong, kind, loyal, sexless, religious, and superstitious. She spoke a bastardized English and did not care about her appearance. She was politically and culturally safe. She was, of course, a figment of the white imagination, a nostalgic yearning for a reality that never had been. The real-life black domestic workers of the Jim Crow era were poor women denied other opportunities. They performed many of the duties of the fictional mammies, but unlike the caricature, they were dedicated to their own families and often resentful of their lowly social status.